Learn how your words make a difference in the way you think. Stay tuned. Hey, this is Damon from NLP Gym. Neuro-linguistic programming is a mental technology that you can use to create the life you desire. For the past several years, I've been learning and studying this technology in order to create the life I desire and also to help people like you create the life you desire. If that sounds interesting to you, please click subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you can get these videos on a regular basis. Also, I'd like to learn a little bit more about you. Please take this quick poll. Just answer a few questions and let me know a little bit about who you are so I can make the kind of videos that you want to see. What I'm going to teach you is something we all do. In fact, it's built into language, all languages, and that is presupposition. Now, there are NLP presuppositions, and I'll get to those in a moment. What I want to explain is really what presuppositions are first and how you're doing it, and how becoming conscious of it can actually change the way you think by changing what you presuppose. Now let's start off with something really basic. And by the way, this is not difficult to understand, but it does require that you pay attention. So if you're currently multitasking or doing something like that, then please stop what you're doing and pay attention to this, otherwise you're not going to get it, or put this video off to another time where you have more time to give your full attention to it. Okay, so presuppositions are built into all sentences. So I'm going to use a very basic sentence, and when I explain it, you're going to probably say, well, of course I know that, but it gets a little trickier. So let's use a simple sentence like, the boy walked to the store. Okay, so very simple sentence. Not many people are going to misinterpret that. You probably imagined a boy walking to a store. Think about, though, all the other things in what you imagined that I did not tell you, okay? And then also pay attention to what did you presuppose about that sentence, okay? So when I say boy, we presuppose gender, boy as opposed to a girl. Okay, now again, you're probably saying, of course, I know that, you know, what's important there. I'll get to that. And then we presuppose that the boy is probably relatively healthy and able-bodied if he was able to walk to the store. But I never said that. But you probably presuppose that. Now, some of you are very visual. And when you're very visual, you probably saw a movie of this. And if you saw a movie of it, what other details did you add into it? Like, when I said it, I actually envisioned a boy walking to a store very much in a town like I live in. So not a city, but a town. Now, if you live in a city, you might have seen the boy walking to a store in a city. You added that extra detail that I did not tell you, but you presupposed it. Okay, so that's very basic, that's very simple. But think about all the other things that you presuppose. Now, I'll give you an example. As a parent, how we might use this with our kids in a way that doesn't really elicit the response that we want. If I ask my daughter, when are you going to start picking up after yourself? I just presupposed that my daughter never picks up after herself. So I'm not honoring the times that she picked up after herself. I'm presupposing that she never did and never has. What does that communicate to her? She probably is thinking, well, what is the point? Because when I do pick up after myself, it goes unacknowledged. So I would ask her maybe, when are you going to pick up after yourself today? So I'm bringing it to more the present. We also speak sentences in our mind. You've probably caught yourself talking to yourself. A lot of times this is unconscious. And a lot of times even the images in the movies in our minds or unconscious. NLP is a lot about bringing that into consciousness so that we can alter it. So what might you be communicating to yourself? If you're using presuppositions that limit you, then you're limiting your thinking. Limiting your thinking will limit what you believe is possible, and that will definitely affect your behavior. The idea here is not to get rid of presupposition. You're not going to be able to get rid of presupposition. We naturally do it all the time. Words themselves are presuppositions. A sentence is a string of presuppositions making a larger, more general presupposition. And then you can go on to a paragraph, a story, all those things. So don't try to stop presupposing things. What you want to do is become aware of how you're presupposing so that you can check in and say to yourself, is this presupposition limiting me or is it empowering me? Now, this will take some practice. The more you do it, though, the more you will naturally start to gravitate in that direction. You will naturally start to speak differently. You will naturally use different words when you're thinking about it just to yourself in your mind, and that will alter your thoughts. Your thoughts being altered will alter your actions. It will also alter your beliefs. The more you think in terms of possibility rather than scarcity, using presupposition, the more you're going to break down beliefs that are limiting you and start creating new beliefs that are empowering you and give you more insight and understanding into what's going to serve you rather than limit you. What actually inspired this video was I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's very young, and she texted me something because I was asking her more and more questions. I'm just demonstrating how NLP works, and I was going deeper and deeper with her questions, and then I started to notice certain presuppositions, and I started explaining this to her, and she had never come across this before, and she thought she was being very positive and very open to opportunity, and for the most part she is. But she was using a few little presuppositions in there that will affect the way that she thinks and then later how she might act. So I started pointing this out to her. So I'm actually going to use her text to go over this as an example of what I mean. It's basically she enjoys others appreciating her, and of course we all do. So there's nothing wrong with this, and there's nothing negative about this. She does get to a point though where she says, my self-esteem would reach a very high level, which is exciting, and I want to feel that I change and leave something relevant on this earth, even if it's on a small scale. Okay, so we all enjoy being acknowledged and being appreciated. And does that affect our self-esteem? It does, but there's something very, very important what's happening here. And that is, and I did another video on this, I'll link it to this one, about locus of control. Locus of control is basically where do you put your authority, or where do you place authority? Do you place it inside yourself, whereas ultimately you're the authority of your own life and what you like, what you don't like, if you're a good or bad person, or do you put it outside of yourself? Ultimately, no matter where you place it, you are the own authority in your life, because if you place that authority outside of yourself, it's still you doing it. What I want to get her to understand is that she should first validate herself rather than look for validation outside of herself or look to build her self-esteem. That's ultimately the presupposition here that caught my attention, that she's looking to build her self-esteem by other esteem. And that's a phrase that Steve Andreas coined, other esteem. When you're looking for self-esteem outside of yourself, what you're actually looking for is not self-esteem. So presupposed in here is that self-esteem comes externally, or that the self-esteem she wants comes externally. Now there's a big problem with this. If your self-esteem is you get externally, then you're not quite in control of it, because you probably had the same situation before where you do something to please someone and it doesn't work. It doesn't please them, or it pleases them momentarily, and then they say, okay, well, what more do you have? And then that person starts leaning on you to get more and more. And in order to maintain that self-esteem, or what you think is self-esteem, you keep trying to please that person. So self-esteem or validation, when sought outside of yourself, is always going to create a lot of insecurity because you're not completely in control of it. But if you know what fulfills you, if you know what your criteria is for who you want to be, then you put that authority within yourself. Now, I was able to recognize this just by her language. And I catch myself a lot of times too. I'm not perfect here. I catch myself a lot, and I surround myself with people. Not all of them know NLP, but a lot of them are very aware. And sometimes they'll catch me saying something and they say, okay, do you realize what you're presupposing there? And I have to go, okay, you're right. And then I will immediately change the words so that they don't presuppose a limitation or presuppose something that's going to create a problem later. And in this case, if she continues to seek validation outside of herself, this will create a problem. One of my students who's talking about the training, Transforming Yourself, one of my online trainings, and I was going live in our private Facebook group, she writes, "It's not so much doing it so well as having so much to work on that the second time through the training is taking time. And now the precision advice," this was the advice I was giving them to get very precise, "and now the precision advice will make that more intense. At the moment, I'm finding that I think I've changed things congruently, and then after a couple of days, behavior and changes slip back. So I go back and find more drilling into the positive intent is needed." Okay, and I actually pointed this out to her while I was going live, that her language here presupposes a lot of struggle, frustration, and trouble. So when she's saying as having so much work on that the second time through, the training is taking time, and now the precision advice, which is the advice I was giving everyone, will make that more intense. Now, intensity alone doesn't mean good or bad. Intense can presuppose just intensity without having a negative or a positive connotation. But what follows leads me to believe that this is not a good intensity. She writes, "At the moment, I'm finding that I think I've changed things congruently, and then after a couple of days, behavior and changes slip back." So this idea that any change I'm making slips back. And well, if it's a real change and it's congruent, it won't slip back. So something else is going on here, but just presupposing that changes will slip back is likely to make that continue to happen. And she writes, "So I go back and find more drilling into the positive intent is needed." And that word drilling does not sound very positive here. It sounds maybe even a little bit painful. So I called this to her attention. I said, "Hey, let's change up your words. Let's make this less painful sounding." We went through the whole thing and we reframed it as in, like, the intensity is good intensity, and it's about learning, not drilling. It's about getting this, embodying this, rather than the drilling and the intensity and the slipping back. I said, instead of slipping back, it's just you're fine-tuning. You sometimes make a change and you realize there's more to be done, so you just go back and fine-tune. So fine-tune sounds a lot better than slip back. The great thing about presuppositions is you can recognize them in any sentences. It might be a little bit difficult to do at first if you're not used to trying this out, but give it a try. Just look at a sentence and then just ask yourself, what does this presuppose? Now, a lot of times people go right into their heads with this. They try to analyze it. It's not about analyzing. The easiest way to do this is, as you read a sentence, notice what goes on internally for you. A lot of us are visual, but especially in different countries and different cultures, there's a lot of auditory people. So a lot of us are going to see a movie of whatever it is we're reading. Some of us might hear something, and sometimes people even hear music, or it might make you feel something. And I don't mean the evaluative feeling. I mean like in your body feeling, or tactile, or that touch feeling. So when you read a sentence, just notice what goes on in your internal experience. And those are all the clues you need to understand what it is you're presupposing from reading the sentence. Now, there is a presuppositions built into the sentence. There's also presuppositions you're going to make. I know this starts to sound complicated. It's really not, though. It's what are you assuming? Or what is the sentence assuming, and what are you assuming? And then you can start to become more and more aware of this. Now, when you first start, you don't need to question everything. You don't need to try to break down every word, every sentence. Just start noticing what's presupposed. And just in that noticing, you will start to naturally change, because you'll start to notice that sometimes you're presupposing something that's not serving you very well. And when you notice that, you will naturally start to make changes. You might get stuck and you might go, well, I get that I'm presupposing this, but I don't know how to reframe it. Sometimes it takes a little more practice, and sometimes If you're feeling stuck, it might be due to something else. There might be another part of you that's resisting that change. And if that's happening, then there's other tools and techniques to overcome resistance. In fact, I just recently did a video on that as well. Check that video out and you'll get to see how to overcome those resistances. So, and that's not just for presuppositions, but that can be anything. Now, NLP has its own set of presuppositions. They're not beliefs. A lot of times people say, oh, well, they're really just beliefs. No, they're really not. Okay. So what's the difference? So presuppositions in NLP are things like there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. And another presupposition would be the meaning of a communication is the response it gets. And that just basically makes you very responsible for the meanings you're putting out there, not just the intent, because a lot of times we say, well, that's not what I meant for that person to respond to, or I didn't mean it for that person to take it that way. But when we take responsibility for that meaning, we become better communicators. There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. That makes it so that we don't get stuck in failure. Failure is just a learning process. So it's just feedback, it's not failure. When you apply these presuppositions to the way that you think, it will immediately change the way that you think. And you start practicing applying that in your life. So here's a great example. And you can look up the NLP presuppositions. They're very easy to find. Just Google it. Just search for it. You'll find there's many. I think there's up to 30. We tend to focus on like 10 or 12. But I think there's up to 30 of them. And you can just start looking at them and saying, okay, well, where's a situation in my life that I want to work on? And what happens when I apply this presupposition to that situation? Sometimes it's almost like magic. You will suddenly change the way that you think about that situation, and suddenly you'll have so many more resources, and sometimes the problem can solve itself right then and there. Check out my website, nlp-gem.com. There you will find some free NLP training as well as some free hypnotic inductions that you can download straight to your phone, straight to your iPad, or to your computer. And you just kick back, listen to my voice, and I will guide you hypnotically into greater confidence. Also, check me out on Facebook. I usually do real-time updates on what I'm up to, any trainings that I'm putting out there, or any live events. So check that out as well. And like I mentioned before, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so now. And if you like this video, please click like right down here. Take care.